Morning.
Record reflects we are back in session. Parties and council are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. Our witness is back on the witness stand. And Mr. Mulaney, you may cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm just going through some of my notes from yesterday, so if I get some of it wrong, please correct, okay?
Yes.
In terms of your assignment in this case, when did the DA actually get in touch with you to do any type of work?
Objection not relevant.
Overruled.
December 17th, 2018.
So, 2 months ago, a little less than 2 months ago?
A little more than 2 months ago, yes.
A little more than 2 months ago, okay. And before, when they contacted you, did they also give you a report from our expert, Shogren and Associates?
Yes.
And so you were able to review that as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But your testimony yesterday, you can correct me if I'm wrong, primarily dealt with Charles Merritt's cash transactions. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you noticed, if you reviewed Mr. Shogren's report, that it deals with Mr. Merritt's bank accounts, correct?
Very briefly.
Okay. It deals with the PayPal accounts of Daniel Kavanaugh and Joseph McStay.
Yes.
Did you review any of those accounts?
I looked at some of the supporting schedules, but I didn't do any kind of detailed analysis.
Did the district attorney's office ask you to do any analysis on Daniel Kavanaugh's PayPal account?
No.
What about Joseph McStay's PayPal account?
No.
What was your understanding of the structure of EIP? Was it a corporation? Was it an individual? What was it?
I don't know.
Do you know who owned it?
I think it was Joseph McStay, but as I said, I'm not sure of the ownership characteristics, so I really won't be certain.
And you indicated that you are a certified fraud examiner, correct?
Yes.
So if somebody other than the owner of the company is going into the owner's accounts and taking money out unauthorized, would that be a form of fraud?
That would be possibly theft.
Which is a form of fraud?
Yes.
Do you know how long EIP continued operations after the family disappeared?
No.
Yeah. Do you know when the family disappeared?
I think it was in February of 2010.
And so if you reviewed Mr. Shogren's report, you saw that money continued to come in from online sales, from other revenue sources in EIP, is that correct?
Objection to hearsay.
Sustained. Also, since that's not noted.
Were you aware that EIP continued operations, continued to receive money from customers after the family disappeared?
Objection to hearsay. Seems facts, not evidence.
Overrule the answer if he knows based on his evaluations.
I didn't look at EIP's transactions specifically, so I really can't comment on what happened at the company at any time.
You said that you had been, I guess, was it a forensic accountant for 35 years or an accountant?
I've been a forensic accountant for about 35 years. I've been an accountant for 39 years.
And a majority of that time as a forensic accountant was spent at the Orange County District Attorney's Office, 26 years, correct?
Yes,
So prior to that, did you work for a private firm?
I worked for 2 accounting firms, 2 private investigation firms, and the Illinois Department of Insurance.
You haven't worked in private, you haven't worked for a private accounting firm, one of the, like the big 6 they call it, or the big 5 they call it.
I have.
Oh, okay.
I worked for Ernst, what's now called Ernst & Young. It was called Ernst & Winnie. It was one of the big 8 back then.
Okay. And did you get, and that's where you got your hours in?
Yes, there, as well as out here in California.
Okay. So how long did, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was back in Illinois when I was working for Ernst & Winnie.
How long did you work at Ernst and, what was it back then?
It was called Ernst & Winnie.
Okay. It was subsequently Ernst and Young?
Yes.
And then something else?
Yes, they,
Right. How long were you there, and that was when you first started?
yes.
Okay. And how long were you there?
I was there, I think around 21 months.
Okay. And then you said you worked for them again when you came here?
No, when out here in California, I worked for a different CPA firm.
So, but a bulk of your career as a forensic accountant was at the Orange County District Attorney's Office, Prosecutor's Office, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you said you testified at 75 trials as an expert, correct?
not all trials, but I've testified more than 75 times in hearings as well as trials.
I would, and how many times of those 75 were on behalf of the prosecution?
Probably about 60, 65.
Do you know what EIP did as a business?
I think they did some do with water fountains, but I'm not that familiar with the business.
Do you know if they built them or sold them?
I don't know.
If I were to tell you that they built, one part of their business was building waterfalls, as a forensic accountant, would it be important to know what the cost of materials, cost of goods were? In determining what income the company may have had?
Sure, yes.
Now, the district attorney yesterday showed you some charts. Do you remember her showing you some charts?
Yes.
Okay. And are these charts that you just thought up yourself, or did you ask to pick out cash transactions and make provide information about the cash transactions you did on your own?
I did that on my own.
Okay. So why did you decide to talk about cash withdrawals?
That seemed to be an important part of evaluating the defendant's financial condition.
Okay. So they asked you to evaluate his financial condition. Is that the...
Objection, no stakes his testimony.
Overruled, Nancy.
I was asked to go through the defendant's bank records and look at the money coming in and the money going out.
And Mr. Weitzman, isn't it true that the district attorney's office asked you to identify his cash transactions, specifically his withdrawals? Isn't that true?
Well, in general, I was asked to look at the money going out of his accounts as well as the money going in. And so the cash withdrawals were very prominent in the money going out.
And if somebody's doing a small business and they operate in cash, are you familiar with those types of businesses?
Sure.
Okay. And in those types of businesses, you're going to have a lot of cash transactions. Would you agree?
What types of transactions are you referring to?
Withdrawals. If the company uses the small, let's say mom and pop shop, uses cash to conduct business, you will see they would withdraw cash from banks to pay for goods, pay for materials.
It's possible.
Okay. Now, if they're using cash to pay for goods or pay for materials, then you won't necessarily have a record of the amount of cash they're spending on cost of materials, would you?
And that's why that's a bad habit.
It's a bad habit, I agree. But many businesses still operate that way. Isn't that true?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled, you can answer if you have an opinion.
I can't say many businesses do that.
Okay. Even if it's some businesses, small businesses operate that way. The question is, it's very difficult to determine cost of materials if the person is paying in cash for many of his items. Would you agree?
If there's no record, any kind of notations or any kind of log, then yes, it would be difficult to track cash purchases.
Did you make a request of the district attorney's office to provide you with any receipts that they might have for cash transactions for Mr. Merritt?
I asked for any kind of records that they had supporting these transactions, and I was told that I got everything.
So I'm going to show you, well, you testified about an exhibit, or this is something that the district attorney's office showed you yesterday, and I'll show you exhibit 879. There you go. I'm going to bring it up to you so you can take a look at it. Do you remember this exhibit? We have it up on the overhead as well.
Yes, I prepared this.
And that's something you prepared, right?
Yes.
And what does that purport to show, Mr. Weitzman?
This is, I went through the bank records of the defendant, and I picked out purchases that may relate to the business of manufacturing waterfalls, something of that nature.
Against what backdrop? Meaning, you made a long list of items and you totaled it. What was that?
I'm not sure what the question was.
Well, you have a total here of 147,000. What's that?
Okay, that is the amount of money that the defendant received in his bank accounts.
Okay. And then, out of 147,000, you have a figure there of 2%.
Yes.
And what was that 2% representative of?
That's this list of all the materials, supply type purchases divided by what looked to be the defendant's work receipts.
Do you have your, I'm sorry, do you have the pointer there?
Yes.
Do you see it on the screen in front of you? If you don't mind just pointing so the jury can take a look.
Will they see it from here?
No, if you could just, like you were doing yesterday, yeah.
So I listed out all those purchases that may have something to do with manufacturing of a waterfall type business, and they totaled $2,678.49. And then I had also gone through the defendant's bank accounts to look for income-related receipts that he had, and they totaled $147,188.85. And then I divided the supply purchases by the income, and that represented 2%.
So the message you conveyed to the jury through this chart was, Mr. Merritt, at least according to what you did in this chart, spends 2% of his work receipts on cost of materials.
Objection, misstates testimony.
Overruled, you can answer.
During this time period, that's the support that I have. Yes.
Okay. And you did this in, first of all, you indicated you were generally unfamiliar with the fountain business, correct? Or what this business was, correct?
I don't know the details of it.
Okay. And did you take into account all the checks that Mr. Merritt wrote to different suppliers when you did this analysis?
I didn't have checks.
You had bank statements. You can sit down, sir. You had bank statements.
Correct.
Okay. So did you see that checks were written on the account?
Yes.
So why didn't you ask what those checks were for?
I never received the checks.
Did you ask the district attorney's office for the checks?
Yes.
And they didn't give them to you?
Well, she said they didn't have them. The bank didn't provide them.
Would you agree that that 2% would change if you saw multiple checks written for materials and things of that nature?
Hypothetically, if there were purchases made by checks,
Okay,
that
and-
may change.
And I don't see an asterisk here that says that you didn't have the checks to look at, that number could change if you knew what those checks were written for, right?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
Aren't you supposed to, as a forensic fraud examiner, a forensic CPA, aren't you supposed to notify the people you're conveying a message to that, hey, I don't have all the information here, so it could be different if I had that information? Aren't you supposed to do that?
Objection argumentative.
I've worked on close to 300 cases, and I've never had perfect information. There's always missing information.
You saw a boatload of checks written on Mr. Merritt's checking account, the two that you testified about. You said you had the bank statements for Union Bank, you had the bank statements for Bank of America, right?
I don't think I had the checks for Union Bank.
You had bank statements, I said.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you saw in those statements that checks were written, right?
Yes.
Because as you pointed out to the jury, there was all those NSF fees, remember that?
Yes.
So obviously checks were being written, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you never wondered, as a forensic accountant, what those checks were for? That they could be cost of materials.
Objection argumentative. Asked and answered.
Sustained as argumentative.
You never suspected in your review that those checks could be a part of cost of materials.
I could only speculate what those checks are for. I don't know what they are for.
But you know when checks are, you knew they were out there, you knew that there was information, that checks were written, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In your review, would it have been proper to give a complete picture to the jury, to factor in whether or not any of those checks were for cost of materials?
Objection argumentative as phrased.
Overruled.
I don't know what those checks are for, so I can't say one way or another about those checks.
When you don't have information, you can ask for it, correct? Which you did.
Yes.
Okay. And when you asked for it, you must have thought it was important, correct?
Well, I always like to have complete information, but as I said, I rarely can get that. So I work with what I have, and I do my analysis with the information I have. I can't speculate about what's out there that I don't have.
Mr. Weitzman, okay, my question is, you thought it was important and you asked for it. Is that correct? Yes or no?
I would like to have that information.
Okay. And you asked for it. My
Yeah.
question is, you asked for it,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't get it, correct?
Right.
Okay. So you didn't have the complete picture, correct, as to cost of materials. Would you agree?
Well, I don't know. If those checks have nothing to do with materials, then yes, what I have up there is accurate.
I know you've testified 65 times for the prosecution. I understand that. But I'm asking you a question. You didn't have the information. We know that. But it's just as likely as that those checks could be related to cost of materials. Or they couldn't.
Objection argumentative. Asked and answered.
Objection sustained as argumentative and calls for speculation and conclusion.
did you ever ask the district attorney's office, and who did you specifically ask? Was it one of these four here, or was it someone else?
My contact was with Ms. Rodriguez.
Okay. And did you specifically ask her her individually for those checks?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
All right. Okay, there was a, let's see, you got another chart here, Exhibit 880. And I'll put that up also for the jury. You remember that?
Yes.
And this is a chart, it seems self-explanatory. It's Charles Merritt's cash and other withdrawals, cash checks, and casino transactions by month. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm making an assumption when you say casino transactions, you're talking about with ATM withdrawals and what you categorize as purchases, correct? Casino purchases?
Yes.
Okay. What percentage of this graph on each one of these bars, because I'm looking at February and I see a big long bar there, right? What's the percentage of what was withdrawn at a casino? Let's take February, let's take that big long line there.
Are you referring to February of 2010?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay. Let me pop up 885 so you can take a look at 885.
Let me see
Can we lay a foundation before it's published to the jury, Your Honor?
Sure.
Did you have a number of a dollar figure of the ATM withdrawals, cash withdrawn at the casinos? Did you have like a dollar figure as well?
I think in my schedules that we covered yesterday, I had information about that.
Okay. And so that would be a percentage of the entire withdrawals for that given period, correct? Because not all of it was withdrawn at a casino. Would you agree?
I agree.
Okay. So whatever was withdrawn at a casino will be just a percentage of what was totally withdrawn for that particular month, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to show you the let's see, Exhibit 885 again. And tell me, we put it into percentages because, let's see, QuickBooks does that, right? They'll actually do a graph and they'll do percentages too.
Objection, foundation.
Well, the witness can answer if he knows that.
Is that correct?
QuickBooks will give you charts.
Okay, great. All right, so if you could take a look at that, and we put some percentages based on the numbers that you use. Tell me if those are numbers that are reflective of your analysis.
I think these are pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's publish that to the jury. This will be 885. Maybe we can dim the lights a little. You can. Okay. So if we'll just start with the February of 2010 month. And if you don't mind, if you could just use the pointer again, I apologize. If we can just direct the jury to February of 2010. So for that month, there was cash withdrawals of approximately somewhere between 22 and 23 or 24,000. Is that about right? Our cash checks or cash withdrawn, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the percentage that was withdrawn at casinos for that particular month would have been 6%. Is that accurate?
Yes, although I now have more information about some of the transactions that were listed as purchases that may be actually cash withdrawal.
I know, I understand, Mr. Weitzman. I'm talking about your numbers that we reviewed already, okay? That's what we're talking about, and your analysis yesterday, okay?
I move to strike if the answer is non-responsive.
Overruled.
So that 6% would be accurate based on your testimony?
Based on the information I had when I prepared this.
Okay.
My schedule, when I prepared my schedule.
All right. And every other month we'll have a percentage associated with it. So for example, in August of '09, if you could direct the jury to August of '09, in that month, 46% of the total was withdrawn, of whatever cash was withdrawn, which was,
Yes.
okay? And 45%, which is almost 50%, let's say 3,000 was withdrawn approximately at a casino during that month. Is that accurate?
Yes, again, with the caveat that some new information shows that there were more cash withdrawals.
I know you're probably going to say that. You don't really need to say that because you may get your opportunity to do that, so you don't need to keep saying that. but-
Objection argumentative.
Okay. Okay. So, and then if we could just go to July or June of '09, and in that month, it was the total money that was withdrawn or cash withdrawn at a casino was 20%, correct?
Yes,
So the difference between this graph and your graph was this kind of breaks out the percentage of what was withdrawn at a casino, correct?
yes, this breaks it out.
Okay. And I'm going to break it out a little bit more based on the dates of withdrawal. Because in your analysis, we were also able to determine what dates these transactions actually occurred, correct?
Yes,
Not only the dates of cash withdrawals, but cash withdrawals that may have been at a casino, correct? Because you were able to look at the bank statement and say, hey, this was withdrawn on this particular day, I'm going to attribute that to a casino withdrawal.
if it's at a casino, yes.
If we're just trying to determine, Mr. Weitzman, how many, let's say, how many days, let's say, per month, money is being withdrawn at a casino, that could also be broken out into some type of graph or chart. Would you agree?
Yes.
So based on your analysis that you provided and testified to yesterday, if you could just take a look at this and see if this is accurate as to what you testified to yesterday. In terms of the number of days cash would have been withdrawn at casinos.
As I sit here on the stand, I cannot say each of these 11 pages of transactions on. I can't speak to the particular dates, but I did get a copy of this last night that I looked at, and I agree with the dates.
Thank you. We can just publish that to the jury. And you said your analysis began with a bank statement, I think, starting in January 23rd, 2009. Is that correct?
I think it's January 20th.
20th? Okay. But the first withdrawal would have been January 23rd, 2009?
Yes.
Okay. So we're looking at this graph. I hate to make you do it again, Mr. Weitzman, but what are we looking at here in terms of the this particular chart? We're looking at, let's say, the month of January. Maybe we can just isolate it and go up a little bit, so we're just looking at January of '09. Because it starts on the 23rd, we're only looking at about 8 or 9 days, right, in January?
Yes,
So those 8 or 9 days, there was 3 days in which Mr. Merritt withdrew cash at a casino. Was that correct?
3 days, but I think each of them had multiple withdrawals.
Correct. And for a total of, one day was $486. That would have been on January 23rd. Then January 26th, there would have been $503, correct?
Yes,
And then January 30th, $404, correct?
yes,
The other days in January, there was no cash withdrawals at casinos, correct?
well, as I said earlier, now that I have more information about some of those casino purchases being cash withdrawals.
And we will take that, as I said, you don't need to repeat that every time. I'm saying this, remember my question preface based on your testimony yesterday.
Objection argumentative.
Call the roll.
Based on yesterday, I'm sorry, can you state your question again?
Sure, we'll just go on to February, okay?
Okay.
So let's scroll up a little. Okay, we're looking at February of 2009. So the first, let's say the first 8 days of February, there was no cash withdrawn at casinos. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay. February 9th, there was a cash withdrawal at a casino for $536, correct?
I think that was multiple withdrawals. That was the total.
Whether it's 1 or 50, it was a total of $536?
Yes.
Okay. And then 2 days go by, then on the 12th, there's cash withdrawal at casino of $288, correct?
Yes.
And then nothing until February 17th for $488, correct?
Yes.
All right, and we can keep going. Nothing else for the month of February, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then let's go into March. So let's see, the first 22 days of March, there's no cash withdrawals at any casino, correct?
Yes.
And then on the 23rd, there's $488 withdrawn, correct?
Yes.
Then the 24th, nothing. 25th and 26th, we have $404 and $492 on those 2 days, correct?
Yes.
Then the rest of March, there's nothing. The next time cash is withdrawn at a casino, $304, $408.
Yes.
And then April 17th, $104.
Did you ask about April 14th?
April 14th, $204?
Yes.
Okay,
April 17th was $104.
correct. Okay. And can we assume, like, when we have that $4 or $8 additional amount, that those are fees that you testified to yesterday?
Yes.
Okay. Then April 27th of '09, there's a $712 cash withdrawal at a casino, correct?
Yes.
And that was it for April, right? The ones we just went through?
Yes.
All right, then we go into May. The first time is May 4th for $84.
Yes.
And then May 11th of '09, there's $1,089.
Yes.
Okay. And May 15th of '09, there's 504.
Yes.
Okay. We go through the rest of May, there's nothing, correct?
Right.
And then the next time cash is withdrawn at the casino is June 12th,
Yes.
404.
Yes.
Then June 24th, 416.
Yes.
And so only those 2 transactions in June, correct?
Yes.
All right, then we keep going. Then we have July 3rd, 104.
Yes.
July 9th, 2009 would be 272. July 10th, 103.
Yes.
Then for July, nothing until the 27th, which is 403. And July 28th, 569.
Yes.
Okay. We keep going. We look August 10th, '09, $83.
Yes.
August 12th, 712.
Yes.
August 14th, 809.
Yes.
August 18th, 417. 412, sorry.
412. Yes.
Okay. And then nothing else for August?
August 24th.
August 24th, 806?
Yes.
Okay. And then nothing else, nothing in September of '09, correct?
Correct.
Nothing in October of '09, correct?
Correct.
Nothing in November of '09, correct?
Correct.
Nothing in December of '09, correct?
Yes.
January, let's see, 2010, nothing, correct?
Right, although there weren't bank statements during this time period.
I understand. Let's see, February 9th, 504. That's the next transaction, correct?
Yes.
And then February 22nd, 504.
Yes.
February 23rd, 304.
Yes.
And then, let's see, that's March 8th. 1006.
Yes.
March 12th, 504.
Yes.
Okay. And then there's nothing the rest of March. And the last transaction where there was a cash withdrawal at the casino was April 12th, 2010, correct?
Yes.
So for that time period, from January of '09 to April of 2010, approximately a year and 3 or 4 months, correct? The total was 15,769.
Yes.
Okay. Now, of that money, that cash that is withdrawn, and you can sit down, Mr. Weitzman, thank you very much. Of the cash that was withdrawn at the casinos, that's what your analysis showed, and we kind of projected it on the dates that it was done through this exhibit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How much of that money that was withdrawn, that 15,000, was used to actually gamble?
I don't know.
What percentage of that money was taken by Mr. Merritt when he left the casino?
I don't know.
What percentage of that money was used to pay entrance fees to poker tournaments?
I don't know.
As part of your analysis and work that you did, were you given access to Joseph McStay's bank statements?
Yes.
Did you review those statements?
I looked at portions of them.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 883. Are these part of the records that you reviewed, Mr. Weitzman?
Yes.
And what are we looking at here?
This is a Union Bank statement for Joseph McStay and Earth Inspired Products for account number 04800043626.
Did you understand this to be the main account for Joseph McStay and Earth Inspired Products?
This is the account that I looked at for them. I can't say if it's their main account.
Can you determine what a main account would be by the type of transactions and the amount of transactions you're seeing?
Well, the word main is relative. So if I'm looking at an account and there are a lot of transactions, there may be another account that has 10 times those transactions.
How about
I really couldn't say the first account was the main account.
How about the primary business account for Joseph McStay? Would you term that as the primary business account?
I don't know.
Okay. But this is a record that you reviewed, correct?
Yes.
Okay, if you could just turn to page 2 for me. I highlighted 4 items or 5 items there. Were you able to see those transactions?
Do I see them?
Yes.
I do see them.
And so when you reviewed the record, you saw those transactions as well?
As I said, I didn't focus on the EIP.
That's not my question. That wasn't my question. My question is, did you review those statements, and did you review specifically those transactions that I'm pointing you towards?
Those transactions don't stick out in my mind.
Again, my question is, did you review them?
I can't
Objection
say.
asked and answered.
I may have seen them, I may not have.
Would it-
I thought that there wasn't anything significant that stuck in my mind to make me believe that I focused on these transactions.
Okay. As a certified fraud examiner, would it be important to know whether or not somebody is going into Joseph's business account and transferring money to his own PayPal account? Would that be important to know?
Objection assumes facts, not evidence, speculation.
Sustained, also beyond the scope of direct.
What was your understanding as to, let me ask, what was the last month that you reviewed a bank statement from this account, Joseph McStay or Inspired Products?
Objection beyond the scope.
Sustained.
Were you given records for Dan Kavanaugh's PayPal account to review?
Did look at it. Yes,
You looked at Dan Kavanaugh's PayPal account?
I was given records through the Chauvin report.
Okay. And when you reviewed that, did you see that Dan Kavanaugh had changed?
Objection lacks foundation, calls for hearsay based on the witness's previous response.
Sustained, also sustained on the grounds of beyond the scope of direct.
When you reviewed Mr. Chauvin's report, did you ask for further information from Ms. Rodriguez?
Objection, relevance, calls for speculation and hearsay.
Sustained, again, also beyond the scope of direct.
I'm going to approach with 882. I believe that you looked at this yesterday. And can you remind us again what Exhibit 882 is?
This is a Union Bank statement account for Charles Ray Merritt, and the account number is 04800479966.
Okay. And you testified about these records yesterday, I believe, that it starts from January 20th of 09 through October 7th of 09. Is that right?
Objection.
Or I'm sorry, November 5th of 2009. Do you recall that?
Yes,
352.
And did you subsequently learn additional information about some purchases that were made from GCAs and PCAs?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
If you learned of subsequent information about PCAs and GCAs and that was in fact withdrawals from casinos, would that change your opinion about what you testified to yesterday?
Your Honor, same objection and to be misconduct.
Sustained as phrased, yet, as I indicated, if you wanted to ask hypothetical questions based on offer of proof as to additional
Sure. Okay.
evidence, you can do that.
Okay. Hypothetically, if you found different information out that related to PCAs and GCAs and how they were used, would that change your opinion as to what you testified to yesterday?
if that information impacted what I testified to, yes.
Okay, and there are a series of transactions that occurred at Union Bank, or in the Union Bank records that occurred at casinos, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to put this on the overhead. So, in looking at these transactions, starting with the first statement on January 20th of 2009, I believe yesterday you testified about these particular transactions, these PCAs. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you indicated that you weren't entirely sure what they were for. They could be cash withdrawals, they could be debits, purchases, things like that, right?
Yes.
So again, hypothetically speaking, if you were to learn different information about that, would that change your opinion as to what you testified to yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go through and highlight these particular charges that we see. If you want to take the laser and use it and show me which particular charges you believe could be different if you learn different information.
The on January 26th of 2009.
Okay, so all of those?
Yes.
Okay. And so would that be correct down there? All of the purchases on the 26th?
Yes.
I'll use a lighter marker for the next one so it's not so difficult to read. And then going on to February, do you see any transactions under the purchases here which could potentially change your testimony?
Yes.
Which transactions?
These first two on February 9th.
Okay, and then
That's it.
on to the next page of that same month of February. Do you see any transactions here under the purchases which you would potentially change your opinion on?
Yes, there are these last three on February 17th.
And by the way, in looking at those items that we just highlighted, we do see ATM withdrawals on the 17th at San Manuel as well, correct?
Yes.
And moving on to March, do you see anything here within the purchases that you would potentially change your opinion on?
Yes. On 3/27, there are the first two transactions,
Okay,
and lower on April 6th, the last three transactions.
okay. And did you also see transactions that occurred at San Manuel on April 6th in the ATM withdrawals?
Yes.
And then moving on to the month of April, do you see any transactions here under the purchases which you would potentially change your opinion on?
Yes. Here on April 21.
Okay, anything else?
Here on April 22.
Any other transactions?
These last two on April 27. And the last two on May 1st.
And then moving on to the month of May, were there any transactions in here that you would change your opinion on?
Yes, these three on May 15th.
Anything else for this month?
No.
Okay. Moving on to the month of June, are there any transactions on here that you would change your opinion on?
Yes, here on June 12th.
Anything else for that month?
That's it.
And then moving on to the month of July, are there any transactions on here that you would potentially change your opinion on?
No.
Okay. And then moving on to August, we have the two data streams that you informed us about yesterday. Are there any other transactions here that you would change your opinion on?
Yes, here on August 13th, the GCA.
Okay.
And here on August 17th, there are three GCA. here on August 25th, PCA,
Okay.
and Speedy Cash is a withdrawal, but not at a casino.
Okay. How about the transaction on August 11th? At the top?
Oh, yes, that PCA.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. And then moving on to September, anything on this one?
No.
And then on to October, anything on this one?
No.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to add up the dollar amount of those additional transactions?
I have not.
Your Honor, would this be a good time for our morning break?
Sure. We'll go ahead and take our morning recess to spend 15 minutes. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to formally express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see everyone back in about 15